Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to On Renewables, the podcast brought to you by the UAE mission to IRENA. That's the International Renewable Energy Agency. My name is Nawal Al Hashimy. I'm the UAE Permanent Representative to IRENA, and I will be your host for a series of podcasts that talks to some of the most influential people and thought leaders in the fields of renewable energy, climate change, sustainability, and the environment about the issues shaping the world we live in. Thank you for joining us. My guest this episode is the UAE's Minister of State for International Cooperation. She also manages the Vice President Office for Political Affairs, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. She is the Director General of Expo 2020 Dubai and the Chairperson of Dubai Cares, Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimy. In heading up Dubai's historic hosting of the World Expo, Her Excellency Al Hashimy has been instrumental in ensuring the 6-month project is delivered in a sustainable manner, while attracting a raft of exhibitors in the renewable energy space to showcase their latest technologies and innovations. Your Excellency, welcome to On Renewables.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctora, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us for the 5th episode of On Renewables. It's a real honor to host you. So let's start with a look at your journey into two of the positions you now hold, Minister of State for International Cooperation and Director General of Expo 2020 Dubai, among, of course, many other roles. That sounds like a very busy schedule. So how did you arrive in these roles, and how do they complement each other?
So they actually complement each other quite naturally. Both require that you understand one another better. Both are built on a set of shared values and shared principles, and both work towards achieving a set of collective goals. Before we decided to bid for the Expo, I was working with other ministerial counterparts on the Sub-Saharan Africa region, more specifically, and I've been able to use some of those engagement programs and plans to help facilitate for Expo. And when that came along, it was actually a seamless transition, and I'm so privileged to still be able to work with many of those colleagues and friends from the region as we prepare for Expo to be held in Dubai on October 2021.
Fantastic. So in your capacity as the Minister of State for International Cooperation, how has your outlook evolved when it comes to the global acceptance of the energy transition towards renewables?
So I'm sure, Doctora, you can speak to this story as well. The journey of renewable energy has never been more powerful. And if you think about how the UAE decided 15 years ago that it could put forward a very powerful business case for climate change and climate action and renewable energy, even though we are at the forefront of the hydrocarbon industry, you can imagine how a lot of folks found that a little bit difficult to understand and certainly difficult to believe. But we did have the conviction that we needed to push forward a binding climate agreement. We invested in Masdar and many other pioneering solar projects, whether in Dubai or around the world. We're in almost 40 countries around the world, where we've put in about $1 billion so far. And now, fast forward those 15 years, and you will see that that story is far more relatable and also far more prominent in all parts of the world. Politically, climate change and renewable energy are the top global issues now, alongside COVID-19. Economically, we've managed to bring the cost for solar below that of fossil fuels, and that is an absolute game changer. And so the trajectory is sort of clear, and the UAE, because of a vision that was set forward 15 years ago, has a first mover advantage. That having been said, it's still a tough journey ahead, as you very well know, and time isn't on our side. When I look at the work that we do on the humanitarian and on the development front, I see more and more how climate change impacts vulnerable populations, especially women, especially in rural areas. We've been seeing more droughts, more hurricanes, more heat waves all around the world. So it has truly motivated me to speak to this as an integral agenda in all of the other conversations I've also been having, and which is why I'm incredibly proud of my colleague, Dr. Sultan Jaber, who's now our special envoy on climate. And I have a lot of confidence that the UAE will be able to continue to accomplish great things in a speedy fashion on both climate as well as on energy.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think, to your point, we know that the UAE has been one of the most active countries worldwide when it comes to humanitarian aid. So where since 2013, the UAE is topped the OECD's table for the largest humanitarian aid donors. We can go as far as to say that renewable energy serves a humanitarian cause. So how have renewable energy solutions been incorporated within the UAE's humanitarian aid drive, and why was it incorporated?
So when you think of a humanitarian agenda, in addition to sort of basic services which are important, there's also a very powerful principle that has emerged quite effectively in more recent years, and that is around human dignity. And I think that if you were to consider how energy or access to energy has a fundamental role to play in enforcing and in supporting dignity and poverty eradication, you will see that there's a parallel that is drawn also with the UAE's own history. Our elders understood and faced this for many, many decades before energy became a lot more accessible here. And if we were to project out of the UAE into the 800 million people or so around the world who have no access to energy, have no access to power, you will know also that many of them are women and often live in conditions with humanitarian settings, which are one of the most fragile and also one of the most vulnerable. So using energy to help enable manufacturing, help enable education, refrigeration, that's part of a humanitarian response plan in any event. And if you look at more closely our experience with IRENA and with the Abu Dhabi Development Fund, and you will see that the $350 million fund which we created on renewable energies for countries all around the world has been particularly important because it's helped generate jobs. It's helped give thousands of people access to power, and for the very first time. And we've done this in a countless number of countries. Those that come to mind are Nepal, Chad, Burkina Faso, etc. But more importantly, I think as we've witnessed in the last couple of years, you'll see that climate change has taken or has given us a much harder beating. So you see, more farms being dried out, fishing being wiped out, massive storms. How many conversations have you been in, Dr. Nawal, where we are told, oh, we never had something like this in the last 80 years, in the last 100 years. We are hearing this frequency and this intensity a lot more right now. And of course, the result of that is migration, conflict, hunger, more poverty. So obviously we need short-term, immediate responses to this, but also we need a long-term sustainable solution of reducing our CO2 emissions. And our investment in renewable energy is part of that overall humanitarian relief plan. This is a story that we can relate to because our elders, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers have experienced what it's like to be in a difficult environment without access to energy, without access to clean water or other foundations of basic good education and healthcare. So we recognize the value of providing these basic services. And so in all of our development projects, we try to really be at the forefront of helping to support the poverty eradication or the human dignity component. And you see this now more recently with what we're trying to do around vaccine distribution or vaccine delivery and logistics around it, just as we did during COVID with PPE gear and with supplies to combat COVID for health care workers and frontline workers. Now we're in the conversation of how do we capitalize on the logistic strength of the logistic hub in Dubai of the United Nations, but also in Abu Dhabi through their HOPE consortium with UNICEF and with the WHO to actually distribute vaccines and make it more readily available. And it's the same principle and the same conviction and the same philosophy which has underpinned our work on renewable energy, which is investing in dignity and also ensuring that people have the building blocks of what it'll take for them to realize their full potential.
Absolutely, very, very well said, Your Excellency. I can't agree more. And I'm looking at you, and I'm looking behind you to the picture of Allah Yarhama, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, and I couldn't get over how emotional it is to see his legacy continue through, through your work and all the work that we are doing now. So on the same theme, following on the success of the first cycle of the UAE Pacific Partnership Fund, enabling the completion of small-scale solar and wind power projects in Kiribati, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu, the UAE launched again another $50 million Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund. Can you tell us a bit more about the details of the work that was completed under those initiatives, why they were launched, and what impact do they have?
It's interesting, why they were launched was many, many years ago when we were still bidding for IRENA. We visited the Pacific. I personally had the privilege of being part of the team that visited the Pacific Islands. And it was the first time to go. In many cases, we didn't even have diplomatic relations with them. And just to understand firsthand what it was like for these island states to navigate such troubled waters, literally. They experienced some pretty significant environmental crises, and to hear those stories and listen to their challenges, and also to understand their aspirations. They wanted to be energy reliant, and they were the first victims of what climate change looked like. The commitment to have a Pacific fund and then later on to have a Caribbean fund was an opportunity or an initiative to help them make the case and help, frankly, the case be made that renewable energies are not only possible, but they're also profitable. And in the long run, they're the way to go. And I think the biggest impact really was psychological in nature, because suddenly these projects, shattered the myth that renewables don't work or renewables are a theory of some kind. We showed that they were financially attractive, that they had direct impact to society, that they employed jobs. And so the 16 projects in the Caribbean, our latest investment in Antigua and Barbuda, in the Bahamas, in St. Vincent and Grenadines, are all demonstrations of the types of projects that can bring to life more access to energy, and in an area and in a space that has struggled with a lot of disaster. And so how do you design around disaster mitigation and building out resilience has also been incredibly educational for us as we look at designing our own development projects in other parts of the world as well.
Absolutely, and there are so much success stories and heartwarming, life-changing stories that we hear from those delegations whenever they come back to Abu Dhabi to attend the IRENA Assembly, when we used to host them in person, or the council meetings. So, Your Excellency, the urgency of transitioning towards renewables has increased since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. A pandemic that has disrupted livelihoods across borders and across industries, leading, of course, to the postponement of Expo 2020 Dubai by 1 year. Tell us about the challenges that the pandemic has brought upon preparing for the Expo, and how you reflected within Expo the UAE's ability to quickly adapt to external circumstances.
So I think I've often said that the pandemic has been very revealing. And I think what it revealed the most was our vulnerability as individuals, but also our dependence and connectivity with everybody else. It was I guess we'll always look back at this moment in time, and inshallah, we're able to look back at this moment in time and recognize and realize how it was that one unifying factor where all of us were in on it together. Some of us much more privileged than others. Certainly here in the UAE, I think we can all be very proud of how our government and how our healthcare system managed to take care of all of us in such an incredibly sophisticated, agile, science-based, and fast manner. As Expo had to be postponed for a year because of the pandemic. I think it's also showed us that the international community once more believed in in the power of our Expo and what our Expo was trying to achieve. And so we had to go through another vote, and we got an overwhelming support from the General Assembly of the BIE, the Bureau of International Expositions, so that they can once more endorse the UAE as the host of the Dubai World Expo in 2021. And I think what that also showed was that our track record of a strong, reliable partner, of being able to adapt to different global circumstances, be it political or health or societal, really did prove that we are that trusted partner, which we are. And so I think that even though it's been a 10-year journey now, an 11-year journey, I think we've tried to use that time to really reflect on what has COVID taught us, not only about who we are as a human species, but also who we need to become collectively to better address the challenges of the future.
Absolutely. So the Expo site is huge and extremely impressive, and it's mighty. I wonder if you could tell us about the urban planning and key considerations that have gone into making sure the Expo is a sustainable project in terms of its construction, green infrastructure, and what the space would be used for in the long term.
The site is twice the size of Monaco. It's a massive physical infrastructure that has been built in record time, but that has been also very well built. Our structures are all LEED gold, and 2 are actually platinum. We have, you must have heard me say this before, Dr. Nawal, we have butterflies and birds and honey on site because we have a bustling natural environment that has grown over the years. We've been super careful about in our construction, super careful about any reptiles that we found, super careful about any natural habitat that was there. We have a group of hazmat rafa, a group of raf trees that we built around, and they're about 85, 90 years old. So we've really tried to introduce a very sustainable, healthy, overall well-being, if you will, approach to the construction of the Expo, to how we manage construction waste, to the recycled materials that we use on our pavements and on our roads, etc. The Science and Children Exploratorium, which is our sustainability pavilion, has been open to the public since January. We've received 50,000 visitors or so to date. And really the story of that pavilion is a story for children and for young students, where we can either take them under the ocean or under the forest. And we've been asking visitors about this experience and how it has moved them. And I'm happy to say that 97% of all of our visitors have told us that they would be changing something in their overall behavior to be more respectful and to live more in balance with nature.
It's fantastic. It's actually mind-boggling. So on the same theme, the Expo is expected to attract a real range of sustainable and renewable energy exhibitions. What can visitors expect to see when they come to the Expo in this space? How much can you tell us ahead of that event?
So really the Expo is one physical space that has the whole world in it. And the whole world will be coming and showcasing what their story is and what they want the world to know about them. The idea is that this Expo can be a range of different things, depending on your interest, depending on your inclination. If you're an investor who's looking at renewable energy options, or if you are a startup, or if you are an artist or a student who wants to research more on water efficiency, or, you'll likely find through our program here something for you, because the whole world is going to be here. It's been fascinating, and the visitors that have been coming to Terra, to our sustainability pavilion, have been sharing their insights as well, and we're trying to bring some of that to our program next year. It's truly a what I would say to a potential visitor is, if you want to see the future, and if you want to see what the world will look like in that future, and you want to have the experience of a lifetime, then this is a place to come and visit.
So moving on from your role at Expo 2020 Dubai, you are also the chairperson of Dubai Cares, a UAE-based global philanthropic organization established in 2007. Dubai Cares is playing a key role in contributing to the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality education, which aims to ensure inclusive and quality education to all and promote lifelong learning by 2030. Dubai Cares also focuses on other sustainable solutions that can help achieve the UN SDGs, such as clean water. Why did you incorporate that?
Well, really, because it's all connected. If you focus only on education to improve people's lives, you have to also look at all of the other components associated to it. So I think taking that holistic approach and bringing about that positive change is what we've tried to do through Dubai Cares and other entities. In other words, a young child cannot eat, who cannot eat and who is also forced to have to walk for miles just to find drinking water is not going to be a good student, is not even going to care about school. And if their studies are all that matters to them, then they can't really be good students if they're hungry or if they're malnourished. Fixing one without addressing others will not actually really truly fix that one thing you intended to do from the get-go. And that's why development aid and humanitarian aid is so complex. And that's why those in the industry are talking about the nexus between humanitarian and development aid, because emergency response without a longer-term sustainable approach to overall development challenges is just not going to be able to lift people off, not just the cycle of poverty, but the current strata that they're in. I think that Dubai Cares is a good demonstration of trying to approach things from a holistic fashion. And I think by and large, most organizations today, certainly the ones most agile, are looking at ways in which they can take on a more holistic approach. And it's because life is it's not like a direct cause effect. We have to come to it at different angles with the same intensity again and again and again. And eventually we'll be able to slowly push the needle in the right direction.
Welcome back to On Renewables. We are here with Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimy, the UAE's Minister of State for International Cooperation and Director General of Dubai Expo 2020. Your Excellency, thank you for staying with us. So,
of course,
we've got your professional insights into the Expo 2020 Dubai and its determination to be a symbol of sustainable development for the region. But now we would like to get to know you a bit better. So, I have some personal questions if you are happy to answer them.
It depends on the questions, Dr. Nawal, but okay. You can ask away and we'll see how this goes.
Okay, great. Here we go. What is your earliest childhood memory?
I think my earliest memory is being underwater. I remember swimming and I remember enjoying how immersive that feeling felt. There wasn't any fear or panic. There was just great comfort. I remember I was in the sea, and I wasn't sure if the sound that I could hear were the waves or if it was just a consequence of being underwater. And later on, discovered that it was just being underwater. So I really enjoyed that.
Fantastic. What's your proudest moment?
Proudest moment, the birth of my first child was a sense of, wow, I finally made it through a pregnancy. I think I remember his cry, and I think that was a very special moment for me that I will not forget.
What technology has changed your life the most and why?
I think just having access to the internet on your handheld phone has just given you access to so much more information. There's nothing that I would not know about and not check on immediately, and then suddenly within a minute or two actually know about it. And I think that is quite transformative.
What's the one piece of advice you would give to your 18 years old self?
Oh, I would tell myself not to worry so much. Don't worry about everything you don't know yet, because eventually you will. And it's okay not to know everything at 18.
Your one hope for the future is?
I hope we all realize that we have a very important role to play and that we need to play it. That we can't just pass the buck to someone else to do. That responsibility is a shared one across the board. And my hope is that every single person living in the UAE, but also by extension, everybody around the world realizes that they too have a significant role to play in their own way, in their own journey, and in their own lives. Because that's the only way we're going to tackle a very complex future at a very difficult time for our planet, is if we truly believe that we are responsible to live out good lives and the best lives we can.
Your Excellency Reem Al Hashimy, as always, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Of course, Doctora, pleasure is mine. I admire you so much. And this has been an honor. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for listening to On Renewables. If you liked us, subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a rating on Apple Podcast. And if you've got any feedback or questions for any of us at the UAE Mission, leave us a comment on our social media pages on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.